The Feast of the Baptism is traditionally joined with the coming of the Magi, and even with the wedding feast of Cana, as part of the Feast of the Epiphany, as an epiphany, as a manifestation of Christ. So Christ's first miracle, the coming of the Magi, and of course his baptism is starting his public life. But as often been pointed out, especially in more modern times, today's feast might have been a manifestation, an epiphany to Jesus himself. Well, it clearly was. The voice of the Father, the descent of the Holy Spirit. And maybe Jesus, who of course was always aware of his unique relationship with the Father, might have understood through the quotes here, the Father's voice, just what this nearness to Christ, to his Father, was to mean in terms of his mission in the world. This is what the evangelist reports. Who knows what exactly happened interiorly for Jesus, but these texts surely became real for him as he began his ministry, also through his temptation in the desert, which we'll have in a few weeks when Lent begins. But if we look at them, we see, well, what did Jesus then understand about who he was, what this relationship with his Father meant in terms of his mission? And even in just this short phrase, "You are my beloved Son, with you I am well pleased," there are actually two quotes. "You are my Son." That's Psalm 2. It's a messianic psalm when the king ascends the throne and he's recognized as the Son of God, in a looser sense. But here fulfilled in Jesus as his beloved Son. "You are my Son, this day I have begotten you," is the rest of the verse. And we've used that for centuries every year on the Christmas Vigil Mass, the Midnight Mass. So what? If you are the Son of God, well then who's God? Well, the God that Jesus preached and exemplified, revealed by word and deed during his lifetime. The God who, according to the letter of John, which is our second reading today, the God who is love. That's it. God is love. Anything else is a distraction from, or a deformation of who God is. And that's clearly whom Jesus revealed, who is madly in love with the human race, who is there always for everyone, to heal, and who just pours out his love indiscriminately, abundantly, madly, without calculating on everyone, as Jesus himself does, and does indeed still, but did, in his own lifetime. It very much fits that first exultant phrase from today's reading from Isaiah 55, "Come, all you who are thirsty, or hungry or thirsty, who have no money, who have nothing, no claim to God's goodness, come and eat without cost, without merit," really. Which, of course, is what Jesus did in his lifetime, feeding the 5,000 literally, but pouring out God's gifts, absolutely not caring, whether, they were worthy. The less worthy they were, the better, in a sense, to be the clear recipients of God's mercy and to understand God's mercy better. So it's just an indiscriminate love poured out. And that's what Jesus revealed also in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, you must be merciful as your Father is merciful, perfect as he is, by, as you see his doing, pouring out the rain on the just and the unjust, the good and the bad, the grateful and the ungrateful, making his sun shine on all people indiscriminately. God doesn't care who's worthy and who's not. We're all unworthy, and we're all made worthy by God. Because we're loved indiscriminately by God, created, and everything is grace. And that's the God, we should recognize. It's the God whom Jesus revealed. And the second part of the phrase is actually from Isaiah 42, the first suffering servant song, which is the reading we almost had, the reading from year A, which is, this is my servant, my chosen one, in whom my soul delights. So that's paraphrased here by, "With you I am well pleased." But it's a servant. A servant, if you read the rest of the psalm, of the servant songs, who goes out there and reveals God's love to all the nations, again, indiscriminately. And the beautiful phrase in that first song that I so love, which says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not quench. Those who are just on the very edge of despair or falling apart, he will encourage, he will delicately minister to in order that they may rise and find life and hope again. So again, those who have least claim are the ones who receive God's love so abundantly. So he gives, as the first reading says, food to the eater, seed to the sower, like the rain and like the very image that Jesus uses in the Sermon on the Mount, the rain that comes down, the rain and snow which come down and will not return without accomplishing their purpose to the heavens. That's what the coming of Christ is, what the love of God is in the world. So if that's the case, if we see that's what happens with Jesus, that's what should happen with us. And that first reading makes really clear. God says to us, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. Wow, as far as the heavens are above the earth, so elevated are my ways above your ways, and my thoughts above your thoughts. In case we didn't get that, God's ways and God's thoughts are infinitely, immeasurably higher and loftier than ours for the very reasons I've been talking about. Because the love is indiscriminate and universal and embracing all people and doesn't count merit and doesn't count worthiness and is without exception poured out to all. The needier the better, the more rejected the better, the more trampled down and marginalized the better. That final servant song about Jesus, coming to take on the sin and the suffering of all people. So that's how God acts. That's why Jesus was indiscriminate. He spent so much time with the prostitutes and the tax collectors, and he spoke about the Samaritans, and he went off to those who were on the margin and rejected, to show that his love really is universal. The lepers, all the ones who were cast out. And of course, he paid the price. Humans can't understand that, especially those in power, whether in government or in church or in business or whatever. They're not interested in that. They want to preserve their domain, their power, and their privilege. Whether it was the high priests and the scribes and the Pharisees, or whether it was Pilate and Caesar. So they conspired to kill him, of course. Because his ways were the Father's ways, which are infinitely above our ways and our thoughts. And so instead of being converted by that, or challenged by that, or transformed by that, we knock him off and get him out of the way so we can do our own thing. So, what is it going to be? Our baptism is not just, now I'm a member of the church, or I can receive communion or whatever. What the opening prayer says today, this traditional prayer, grant that we may be inwardly transformed through him whom we recognize outwardly like ourselves. He comes into our humanity so that we can share his divinity, so that we can be like the Father. And work in the Holy Spirit, who came down as a dove of peace and love and innocence and delicacy, not breaking the bruised reed or quenching the smoldering wick. So that's what we need to do. That's what we should expect to have happen to us if we really allow the grace of the Spirit and the power of Christ to transform us so that we have the mind and the heart of Christ ourselves. That's what religion is for. It's not to make us good citizens. Well, it is actually, but its main thing is to make sure that we are Christic, fully human, to the full dimensions of our humanity and of the Father's love, divine love in our world. So no exceptions, no exclusions, preference for the poor and the marginalized and those who are rejected because they're an inconvenience to the power structure of church or state or business or whatever it might be. So how are we doing with that? Not so well. A lot of Catholics supported Trump, still do. Now, they have their reasons, I guess. But you can't support a mob, a white nationalist mob storming the Capitol. There was an editorial in a Catholic paper this week which said it quite simply and forthrightly. Catholics cannot support white nationalism. You can't be a white nationalist and be Catholic. You cannot. And that was a white nationalist mob. White and nationalist. Neither of those are even remotely universal, or all-embracing, or all-accepting, or indiscriminate in love and acceptance and embracing. Not even remotely. So you can't support white nationalism in any of its forms, especially when it's based on lies and deceptions, as it is. So are we going to do this or not? And by the way, anytime Jesus was a brown-skinned Middle Eastern Jew, please remember, anytime you see a white, blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan Jesus, that's dangerous fiction and not fact, as I recently wrote, and throw that holy picture in the garbage. It's dangerous. Is our love going to be as indiscriminate and all-embracing and as abundant and as unyielding and unremitting as the Father's own love, as Jesus' own love, especially towards all those who are rejected as unfit to be in the white nationalist country that we supposedly is America? It's not. It never has been, hopefully never will be. And the church certainly should not be that. Racism is rampant in the churches, Catholic and Protestant. It always has been. Hidden though it might sometimes be. So real examination of conscience is necessary here. And in that sense, what's been going on is really salutary because it forces us to confront these things not only externally but internally. Only begotten Son has appeared in our very flesh. May we be inwardly transformed through him whom we recognize as outwardly like ourselves. That's why he came, to help us to embrace the full dignity of our humanity, the full breadth of our humanity, and the full breadth of our call to share in the divine nature, which created the whole universe, loves the whole universe, loves all nations, all people, all races, all religions, all sexual orientations. All of them are beloved by God, indiscriminately and madly. How about by us? How much have we been inwardly transformed? How much is that changing our outward actions, our decisions, the way we live? What happened this week is a wake-up call. Today's feast is a wake-up call to embrace who we really are, brothers and sisters of everyone and everything in the universe.